Have you ever noticed that the harder you try to force something into your life, the more distant it seems to become? A relationship you desperately try to save begins to fall apart. An opportunity you chase with everything you have keeps slipping away. A future you carefully planned refuses to unfold the way you imagined. In those moments, the instinct is usually to push harder, control more, and demand an answer. But what if the problem is not that you're doing too little? What if you are trying to control something that life is asking you to understand differently? Carl Jung spent much of his work exploring the tension between the conscious ego and the deeper forces operating within the human psyche. From a Jungian perspective, we are not always fully aware of what drives our choices, attachments, fears, and ambitions. Sometimes we insist on a particular outcome because it protects our identity, validates our worth, or keeps us from confronting something uncomfortable within ourselves. This does not mean that we should become passive or stop taking responsibility for our lives. It means learning to recognize the difference between purposeful action and desperate control. When people say, "Don't force anything, let God guide you," the idea does not have to mean waiting for a miracle or abandoning reason. It can be understood as an invitation to loosen our grip on what we cannot control, pay closer attention to what our experiences are teaching us, and remain open to paths we had never considered. In this video, we will explore 10 psychological ideas inspired by Jung that can help us understand why surrender is not weakness, why uncertainty can reveal hidden parts of ourselves, and why sometimes the most meaningful direction appears only after we stop trying to force the outcome. 1. Why we try to control everything. The desire for control often begins with something very simple. Uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Human beings naturally want to know what will happen next, whether a relationship will survive, whether a decision will succeed, whether money will be enough, or whether the future will resemble the plans we have made. When those answers are unavailable, the mind frequently reacts by trying to increase control. We organize, predict, analyze, repeat conversations in our heads, and imagine every possible outcome. These behaviors can create the temporary feeling that we are protecting ourselves, even when the situation itself has not actually become more predictable. Control becomes especially attractive when we have experienced disappointment before. If someone has been rejected, betrayed, embarrassed, or suddenly confronted with loss, the mind may begin creating rules designed to prevent the same pain from happening again. A person may think, consciously or unconsciously, "If I pay attention to every detail, I will never be surprised again." The problem is that life rarely follows rules that perfectly protect us from disappointment. What begins as preparation can slowly become hypervigilance, and what begins as responsibility can become an exhausting attempt to remove uncertainty from existence. From a Jungian perspective, the conscious ego wants to experience itself as the director of life. It creates plans, goals, identities, explanations, and expectations. This ability is essential because, without some degree of conscious direction, we would struggle to make decisions or build anything meaningful. But the ego can easily mistake its limited perspective for complete knowledge. It begins to assume that because it has created a plan, the plan must be the correct path. When reality refuses to cooperate, the ego may interpret change not as information, but as a threat. This is why losing control can feel strangely personal. A failed project is not always experienced simply as a failed project. It can feel like evidence that we are incompetent. A person leaving a relationship can feel like proof that we are unlovable. A career opportunity disappearing can feel like confirmation that our future is collapsing. The external event becomes connected to our identity. Once that happens, we are no longer merely trying to influence a situation. We are trying to defend our sense of who we are. There is also a hidden contradiction in excessive control. The more desperately we try to guarantee an outcome, the more emotionally dependent we become on that outcome. Imagine someone preparing for an important interview. Healthy preparation means researching the company, practicing answers, sleeping well, and arriving prepared. Excessive control begins when the person spends hours imagining every possible question, interpreting every facial expression during the interview, and believing that getting this specific job will determine their entire future. Preparation increases capability. Obsession increases anxiety. Relationships reveal this distinction particularly clearly. We can communicate honestly, behave respectfully, establish boundaries, and decide what kind of treatment we are willing to accept. What we cannot do is control another person's feelings, timing, priorities, or decisions. Yet people often attempt exactly that through constant reassurance seeking, repeated messages, emotional pressure, or endless analysis of small behaviors. These actions may look like attempts to preserve connection, but underneath them, there is often a fear of allowing another person to remain psychologically independent. Jung's broader view of the psyche also challenges the assumption that our conscious plans always represent our deepest needs. A person may consciously want status while unconsciously longing for freedom. Someone may insist on maintaining a relationship while another part of the psyche recognizes that the relationship has become destructive. Another person may chase constant achievement because slowing down would force them to encounter feelings of emptiness they have avoided for years. In this sense, the need for control can sometimes protect us from information coming from within ourselves. This is where self-observation becomes more useful than self-judgment. Instead of asking, "Why am I so controlling?" we can ask, "What am I afraid would happen if I stopped controlling this?" That question changes the conversation. Perhaps the fear is abandonment. Perhaps it is humiliation. Perhaps it is financial insecurity, loneliness, or the possibility of discovering that a long-held dream no longer fits the person we have become. The controlling behavior is often easier to understand when we identify the fear underneath it. Letting go of excessive control does not require becoming careless. It means recognizing the boundary between influence and command. We can influence our habits, preparation, communication, effort, and choices. We cannot command the future, other people's emotions, chance events, or every consequence of our decisions. Psychological maturity involves learning to invest energy where action is possible while tolerating the uncertainty that remains. That tolerance is not passivity, it is a form of realism, and this is where the spiritual dimension of our theme begins to emerge. To stop forcing everything does not mean believing that every disappointment is secretly a reward, or that every event was predetermined for our benefit. It means admitting that our conscious mind does not possess a complete map of life. Whether someone expresses that humility through faith in God, trust in a larger meaning, or simply acceptance of uncertainty, the psychological movement is similar. The ego loosens its demand to control every outcome. Only then can we begin to notice whether the path we are fighting to preserve is truly ours, or whether our struggle to control it is preventing us from seeing another possibility. 2. The ego believes it knows the entire path. The ego is the part of us that says, "I know who I am, I know what I want, and I know where my life should go." It creates continuity by organizing our memories, ambitions, roles, and expectations into a coherent story. This structure is necessary. Without it, we would struggle to make decisions or maintain a stable sense of identity. But the problem begins when the ego assumes that its story is the whole truth. From a Jungian perspective, the conscious personality is only one part of the psyche. Beneath conscious awareness exist emotions, memories, impulses, fears, symbols, and patterns that may influence us without asking for permission. This means that the plan we consciously defend may not always reflect everything happening inside us. We may sincerely believe we want one thing while another part of us is moving in a completely different direction. Consider someone who has spent years pursuing a particular career because it represents success, security, or family approval. From the outside, the path may appear perfectly logical. Yet internally, that person may feel increasingly empty, irritable, or disconnected. The ego can respond by doubling down. Work harder, achieve more, prove the decision was correct. But those uncomfortable feelings may be carrying information that the conscious plan does not want to hear. This is one reason people can become deeply attached to outcomes that no longer serve them. Changing direction can feel like admitting that the original plan was wrong. And for the ego, being wrong can feel threatening because identity often becomes tied to previous decisions. I am the person who will make this relationship work. I am the person who will succeed in this profession. I am the person who never gives up. These statements can become psychological cages when reality begins asking for change. There is an important difference between commitment and identification. Commitment says, "This matters to me, so I will give it serious effort." Identification says, "If this fails, I fail." The first allows flexibility. The second creates fear. When identity becomes dependent on a specific result, we are far more likely to force situations long after they have stopped being healthy or realistic. Jung's idea of individuation is useful here because it suggests that psychological development involves becoming more conscious of the wider personality, not merely strengthening the ego's existing preferences. Growth can therefore be disruptive. It may challenge the image we have built of ourselves. A person who always believed they had to be strong may need to acknowledge vulnerability. Someone who built their identity around pleasing others may need to disappoint people for the first time. This is why unexpected obstacles can sometimes become psychologically meaningful. Not because every obstacle is a supernatural message, but because disruption forces us to examine assumptions that success might have allowed us to ignore. When something stops working, we are invited to ask new questions. Why do I want this so badly? What would it mean about me if I changed direction? Am I pursuing this because it is meaningful, or because I am afraid of who I would be without it? The ego prefers certainty because certainty protects the story it already knows. But life continuously introduces information that does not fit our preferred narrative. People change, relationships change, careers change, our values change. Even the person we were 5 years ago may no longer recognize what matters to us today. Psychological flexibility begins when we allow reality to update the story instead of demanding that reality obey an outdated version of ourselves. Spiritually, this is where the idea of guidance becomes more nuanced. Saying, "Let God guide you," does not require believing that every decision will be made for you. It can instead represent humility, the recognition that your present understanding may be incomplete. Faith, in this sense, does not eliminate thought or responsibility. It creates enough inner space to say, "I will act with sincerity, but I accept that I may not see the entire path yet." Before you go, if you're looking for a simple way to reduce stress and find more inner peace, I have something for you. Check out the ebook, The SIM Method, 5 minutes a day for inner peace and mental clarity. It only takes 5 minutes a day and can help you build a calmer, clearer mind. The link is in the first pinned comment, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to The Trauma of Being for more content like this. The paradox is that surrendering the fantasy of complete knowledge can actually make us more capable of making wise decisions. When we stop defending a predetermined destination at all costs, we become more observant. We notice what is working, what is harming us, what keeps repeating, and what quietly asks for our attention. The ego may want a map from beginning to end, but psychological maturity often means walking with only enough clarity for the next honest step. 3. When forcing something becomes self-betrayal, there is a point where persistence stops being strength and begins to become self-betrayal. This usually happens when we continue pushing towards something, even though our emotional reality, values, or circumstances have clearly changed. We tell ourselves that quitting would mean weakness, so we ignore exhaustion, disappointment, or repeated evidence that the situation is damaging us. The effort continues, but the reason for continuing becomes less about purpose and more about fear. One of the most common reasons people force situations is the belief that past investment must be justified. If we have spent years in a relationship, career, friendship, or personal goal, walking away can feel like wasting everything that came before. But psychologically, this can trap us. The time already spent cannot be recovered, and continuing only because of that investment may deepen the cost. Sometimes the healthiest decision is not to protect the past, but to stop sacrificing the future to it. This dynamic often appears in relationships. A person may know that communication has become unhealthy, trust has been damaged, or emotional needs are consistently ignored. Yet instead of asking whether the relationship still supports growth, they focus entirely on saving it. They become preoccupied with fixing the other person, changing the dynamic or returning to how things used to be. In the process, they may stop listening to what their own experience is telling them. From a Jungian perspective, this kind of insistence can reveal a conflict between the conscious identity and deeper psychological needs. The conscious ego may say, "I must make this work," because failure threatens an important self-image. Perhaps the person sees themselves as loyal, successful, strong, or incapable of giving up. But the unconscious may be expressing resistance through recurring frustration, anxiety, resentment, or emotional exhaustion. These reactions are not automatic instructions, but they can be signals worth examining. Self-betrayal often begins quietly. It may look like saying yes when you mean no, accepting disrespect to avoid losing someone, staying silent to preserve harmony, or continuing to pursue a goal that no longer feels meaningful. At first, these compromises can seem small. Over time, however, they can create a widening distance between the life we are living and the person we are becoming. This is where the concept of the shadow becomes relevant. Sometimes we force a situation because we are trying to avoid confronting something about ourselves that feels uncomfortable. We may fear being alone, fear appearing unsuccessful, fear disappointing our family, or fear admitting that we changed our minds. These fears can remain outside conscious awareness while still influencing our choices. The harder we push, the less likely we are to ask what hidden fear is driving the effort. A useful question is not simply, "Should I keep going?" but "Who am I becoming by continuing this?" That question shifts attention away from the external prize and toward the internal cost. If pursuing a goal requires constant self-silencing, dishonesty, resentment, or the abandonment of basic values, then success may come at a price that is psychologically too high. Not every victory is worth becoming someone you do not respect. This does not mean that discomfort is always a sign to leave. Growth itself can be difficult, and meaningful commitments often require patience, discipline, and sacrifice. The key difference is whether the difficulty is helping us develop or steadily eroding our sense of integrity. Healthy effort usually contains some form of meaning, learning, or mutual movement. Destructive forcing often feels like repeating the same struggle while hoping reality will eventually surrender. The spiritual language of surrender can be helpful here when it is understood responsibly. Let God guide you does not mean refusing to act or waiting passively for circumstances to change. It can mean becoming willing to release an outcome that requires you to repeatedly violate your own conscience, dignity, or psychological well-being. Faith in this sense becomes the courage to stop worshipping a specific result. Sometimes the most difficult form of trust is accepting that a closed path may need to remain closed. We do not have to pretend that rejection is pleasant, that loss is easy, or that every ending has an obvious purpose. But we can choose not to destroy ourselves trying to reverse what reality continues to show us. There are moments when moving forward requires effort, and there are moments when growth begins with release. Wisdom lies in learning the difference. 4. The unconscious often speaks before we listen. One of Jung's most important ideas is that the conscious mind is not the whole of the psyche. We may believe we understand why we make certain choices, why we feel drawn to certain people, or why a particular situation affects us so strongly, yet deeper psychological processes can be operating outside our awareness. The unconscious does not usually speak in clear sentences. It often appears indirectly through emotions, recurring patterns, dreams, symbols, reactions, and behaviors that seem difficult to explain. This is why people sometimes say, "I knew something was wrong before I could explain why." That feeling does not necessarily mean they received a supernatural warning. It may simply mean that the mind registered details before conscious reasoning organized them into a conclusion. Tone of voice, inconsistencies, body language, memories, and previous experiences can all influence us beneath the level of immediate awareness. What feels like intuition can sometimes be the result of information being processed quietly in the background. Jung took dreams seriously because he believed they could reveal psychological material that consciousness had ignored or suppressed. He did not treat every dream as a prophecy about the future. Instead, dreams could function as symbolic expressions of conflicts, fears, desires, or aspects of the personality that had not yet been fully recognized. For someone trying to control every part of life, this is significant because the unconscious may introduce perspectives that do not fit the ego's preferred plan. Imagine someone who insists that they are perfectly satisfied with a relationship, yet repeatedly dreams of being trapped in a room without a door. It would be irresponsible to declare that the dream proves they must leave the relationship. But it may be worth asking what the image of confinement represents psychologically. Does the person feel restricted? Are there conversations they are avoiding? Is there a part of their life that no longer feels free? The value lies in reflection, not literal prediction. The unconscious can also reveal itself through repetition. So a person may repeatedly choose emotionally unavailable partners, abandon projects just as success approaches, or become defensive whenever certain topics are mentioned. If the same pattern keeps appearing across different situations, the external circumstances may not be the only issue. Jungian psychology encourages us to examine what we ourselves repeatedly bring into the pattern. This can be uncomfortable because conscious explanations often protect our self-image. It is easier to say, "Everyone I meet eventually disappoints me," than to ask whether we repeatedly choose people who confirm an expectation we already carry. It is easier to blame every failed opportunity on bad luck than to examine whether fear causes us to withdraw when responsibility increases. The unconscious often becomes visible where our explanations and our behavior do not fully match. Strong emotional reactions can provide another clue. Sometimes the intensity of our response is much larger than the immediate event seems to justify. A minor criticism feels devastating. Someone else's confidence creates disproportionate anger. Being ignored for a few hours triggers overwhelming anxiety. Jung might encourage us to ask whether the current event has activated something older within us. The reaction is real, but its source may extend beyond the present moment. This kind of observation should not become another attempt at obsessive control. The goal is not to analyze every dream, coincidence, or feeling until life becomes an endless puzzle. That can simply replace external control with psychological overanalysis. Instead, we can pay particular attention to patterns that are persistent, emotionally significant, or repeatedly disruptive. Reflection is most useful when it increases understanding rather than anxiety. For a spiritual person, listening inwardly may also become part of prayer or contemplation, but there is an important distinction between remaining open to meaning and assuming that every internal impulse comes directly from God. Fear, desire, insecurity, memory, and wishful thinking can all influence what we experience internally. Discernment therefore matters. A meaningful inner life combines openness with humility rather than absolute certainty. Perhaps guidance sometimes begins before we consciously recognize it, not because an invisible voice gives us precise instructions, but because parts of our experience have been trying to reach our attention for a long time. A recurring feeling, an uncomfortable pattern, a dream that stays with us, or a reaction we cannot easily explain may invite us to look more deeply. When we stop forcing an answer and become willing to listen, we may discover that the next step was not entirely absent, we simply had not yet learned how to recognize it. 5. Surrender is not the same as giving up. Surrender is often misunderstood because it sounds like defeat. Many people hear the word and imagine someone abandoning their responsibilities, lowering their standards, or simply waiting for life to decide everything for them. But psychological surrender is something very different. It is the willingness to stop fighting against realities that cannot be controlled while continuing to act responsibly where action is still possible. In that sense, surrender is not weakness. It is the end of a useless struggle. Giving up says nothing I do matters. Surrender says, I will do what I can, but I will not pretend that I control everything. That distinction is essential. A person can prepare carefully for an opportunity, communicate honestly in a relationship, work toward recovery from a setback, and still accept that the final outcome will involve factors beyond personal control. Surrender does not eliminate effort. It removes the illusion that effort can guarantee a specific result. This is difficult because if you're looking for a simple way to reduce stress and find
If we
more
believe
inner
that
peace,
every result depends entirely on
Check
us,
out the ebook
then
The
working
SIM
harder
method,
can temporarily
5 minutes a
reduce
day
anxiety.
for inner peace and
But when the
mental
situation
clarity.
refuses
It only
to
takes
change,
5 minutes a day,
we may interpret
and
that
can help you
resistance
build
as
a calmer,
proof that we
clearer
need
mind.
even more
The link
effort.
is in the first pinned comment.
This creates
and if
a
you enjoyed
cycle.
this video,
More
don't
fear
forget to
leads to
subscribe
more
to
control.
The Trauma of
More
Being
control
for more
leads to more
content like
exhaustion.
this.
And exhaustion leads to an even greater fear of losing what we have been trying to protect. Jungian psychology offers another way of looking at this conflict. The ego is important, but it is not the total personality. Individuation involves gradually developing a relationship with parts of ourselves that do not fit neatly into our conscious plans. Sometimes surrender begins when the ego recognizes that it cannot dictate every stage of psychological development. We may have to encounter uncertainty, contradiction, disappointment, or change before a deeper sense of direction becomes visible. Imagine someone who desperately wants a particular relationship to continue. They communicate, apologize when appropriate, listen, and make genuine efforts to improve the connection. These are healthy actions, but if the other person chooses to leave, there is a point where continued pursuit stops being love and becomes resistance to reality. Surrender means respecting the other person's decision while allowing yourself to grieve. Giving up on life would be very different from accepting that one specific relationship has ended. The same principle applies to goals. Suppose you spend years building a business that eventually fails. Acceptance does not require pretending that the experience did not hurt or that the failure was secretly wonderful. It means acknowledging what happened, learning what can reasonably be learned, and refusing to spend the next decade psychologically arguing with the past. The failure becomes part of your story without being allowed to become the definition of your future. There is also a biological reason surrender can feel relieving. Remaining in constant resistance keeps attention focused on threat. What if this goes wrong? What if I lose this? What if I cannot fix it? Acceptance can interrupt that loop by allowing the nervous system to respond to the situation that actually exists rather than the catastrophe the mind keeps rehearsing. This does not make the problem disappear, but it can create enough psychological space for clearer decisions. Spiritually, surrender is often associated with trust in God, but healthy spiritual surrender should not be confused with avoiding responsibility. Someone may pray for guidance and still need to make the difficult phone call, apologize, seek professional help, change their habits, or leave an unhealthy situation. Faith does not necessarily remove human agency. It can provide a larger framework within which responsibility and uncertainty coexist. This also protects us from a dangerous form of spiritual thinking, believing that if we surrender correctly, God must give us the outcome we want. That is simply another attempt at control disguised as faith. I will let go so that this person comes back is not really letting go. I will trust God so that I receive this exact opportunity still contains a hidden demand. Genuine surrender leaves room for the possibility that the answer may look different from our expectation. Perhaps the most mature form of surrender is being able to say, I know what I hope for, I will act according to my values, and I will remain open to what reality reveals. That posture contains both courage and humility. You do not stop walking simply because you cannot see the entire road. You take the next responsible step without demanding certainty about every step after it. And sometimes, when the struggle to control the destination finally weakens, we become capable of seeing paths that our fear would never have allowed us to consider. 6. Why closed doors can reveal the shadow. A closed door can be frustrating because it confronts us with something the ego does not like to admit. We are not always in control of access, timing, recognition, or acceptance. A rejected application, an unanswered message, a relationship that ends, or an opportunity that disappears can feel like a direct attack on our plans. But from a psychological perspective, the most important question is often not only, why did this happen? It is also, why does this particular rejection affect me so deeply? This is where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes useful. The shadow refers to aspects of the personality that we reject, hide, deny, or fail to recognize consciously. These parts are not always negative. They may include anger, ambition, vulnerability, envy, creativity, independence, or needs that do not fit the image we want to maintain. When life blocks a path we desperately wanted, some of these hidden aspects can suddenly rise to the surface. Imagine someone who is rejected from a prestigious position. At first, the disappointment seems to be entirely about the job. But with deeper reflection, the person may realize that the position represented more than income or professional development. It represented proof of worth. It represented finally being admired by a parent, outperforming an old rival, or confirming an identity built around success. The closed door exposes the hidden psychological meaning attached to the opportunity. Relationships can reveal the shadow even more intensely. When someone pulls away from us, we may discover emotions that contradict the image we have of ourselves. A person who believes they are calm may become possessive. Someone who sees themselves as independent may experience overwhelming fear of abandonment. Someone who prides themselves on kindness may feel intense resentment. These reactions can be uncomfortable, but they can also show us parts of ourselves that were previously easier to ignore. The goal is not to shame ourselves for these reactions. Shadow work is not about discovering that we are secretly terrible people. It is about becoming more honest about the full range of our psychological life. If jealousy appears, we can ask what insecurity it reveals. If anger appears, we can ask what boundary may have been violated. If desperation appears, we can ask what we believe this person or opportunity was supposed to give us. A closed door can also reveal projections. Projection occurs when we unconsciously attribute aspects of ourselves to other people. For example, we may become fascinated with someone because they seem courageous, free, creative, or confident. We believe that we need that person in order to experience those qualities. But part of the attraction may come from qualities within ourselves that have not yet been developed. When the relationship ends, the pain can become an invitation to reclaim what we had projected outward. This does not mean every rejection is secretly a psychological lesson designed specifically for us. Sometimes, a job goes to another candidate because they had better experience. Sometimes relationships end because two people want different things. Sometimes circumstances simply change. A responsible Jungian interpretation does not deny practical reality. Instead, it asks what our reaction to reality can teach us about ourselves. There is another danger here, turning every closed door into evidence that God is protecting you. That may be a meaningful belief for some people, but it should not be presented as a fact that can be proven. A more grounded spiritual perspective is to say that disappointment can become meaningful depending on how we respond to it. Faith can help someone endure uncertainty, but reflection is still necessary. Sometimes what we call a closed door is also the loss of an identity. If a relationship ends, perhaps we are no longer the person who will marry them. If a career collapses, perhaps we are no longer the person who was destined for that profession. That loss can feel disorienting because the ego must reorganize its story. Yet precisely in that instability, previously ignored possibilities may become visible. This is one reason forcing a closed door can be psychologically costly. The more energy we spend trying to recover the old identity, the less attention we give to what the experience is revealing. The shadow does not become integrated because we obtained everything we wanted. It becomes more visible when life challenges the image we had of ourselves. And sometimes what appears to be rejection from the outside becomes internally an invitation to meet a part of ourselves we had been avoiding. 7. What does "let God guide you" really mean? The phrase "let God guide you" can sound simple, but psychologically it raises a difficult question. How do we distinguish genuine guidance from fear, wishful thinking, or the desire to avoid responsibility? People often want certainty, especially during periods of loss or confusion. In those moments, spiritual language can become either a source of wisdom or another way of escaping uncertainty. A mature approach requires humility, reflection, and the willingness to admit that not every feeling is a message. Carl Jung was deeply interested in religion because he saw religious symbols and experiences as psychologically significant.
He did not reduce spirituality to something meaningless, but neither did he present psychology as a way of proving theological claims. His work explored how images of God, faith, ritual, and transcendence can shape the inner life. For Jung, these experiences mattered because of the powerful role they could play in the psyche. From this perspective, divine guidance does not have to mean receiving precise instructions about every decision. It may instead mean developing a relationship with meaning itself. A person might pray, reflect, journal, spend time in silence, or examine recurring inner conflicts. These practices can create distance from immediate fear and allow deeper values to become clearer. The important point is that spiritual reflection should increase awareness, not replace judgment. Suppose someone is deciding whether to leave a career that has become deeply unfulfilling. They might ask God for guidance, but guidance may not arrive as a dramatic sign. It may emerge gradually through persistent dissatisfaction, honest conversations, changing priorities, practical opportunities, or a growing recognition that their values no longer fit their current path. The process can be spiritual while still being grounded in reality. This is where discernment becomes essential. Fear can imitate intuition, desire can imitate conviction, anxiety can make an ordinary event feel like an urgent sign. If someone desperately wants a relationship to return, they may interpret every coincidence as confirmation that reunion is inevitable. But psychological maturity requires asking whether the interpretation is supported by reality or simply comforting the ego. Jung's psychology encourages this kind of self-examination because the unconscious can influence what we believe we are seeing. We may project our hopes, fears, or unresolved needs onto people and events. A person who feels abandoned may perceive rejection everywhere. Someone longing for approval may interpret ordinary kindness as a promise. Becoming aware of projection does not destroy spirituality. It can protect it from becoming self-deception. Healthy guidance also does not usually remove personal responsibility. If you pray for reconciliation, you may still need to apologize honestly. If you ask for financial direction, you may still need to examine your spending, develop skills, or seek professional advice. If you ask for peace, you may still need to establish boundaries. Spiritual trust becomes stronger when it works alongside responsible action rather than replacing it. There is also value in accepting that some questions may remain unanswered for a time. The ego wants immediate clarity because uncertainty is uncomfortable. But not every decision becomes obvious on demand. Sometimes wisdom develops through waiting, observing, gathering information, and allowing emotional intensity to settle. What feels impossible to understand today may look very different after time has created psychological distance. This form of waiting should not be confused with paralysis. You can continue living while remaining uncertain. You can make provisional decisions, change direction when new information appears, and acknowledge that no choice comes with complete guarantees. In this sense, faith becomes less about knowing exactly what will happen and more about trusting that you can respond meaningfully to what happens. Perhaps let God guide you is most psychologically useful when it becomes an invitation to loosen the ego's demand for absolute control. You act, but you also listen. You plan, but you remain willing to revise the plan. You hope, but you do not turn hope into entitlement. And you allow the possibility that guidance may not lead you toward the outcome you originally demanded, but toward a deeper understanding of who you are becoming. 8. Synchronicity without magical thinking. One of Jung's most famous ideas is synchronicity, a concept often simplified into the belief that everything happens for a reason. But Jung's idea was more subtle than that. He was interested in meaningful coincidences, moments when an external event and an inner psychological state appear connected by meaning, even when there is no obvious causal relationship between them. The emphasis was not on predicting the future, but on understanding why certain coincidences can feel deeply significant to a person. Imagine that someone has been thinking seriously about changing careers. During that period, they unexpectedly meet an old friend who recently made a similar transition. A few days later, they discover a course related to the field they have been considering. It may be tempting to declare that the universe has delivered a guaranteed instruction, A more grounded interpretation would be that these events have become meaningful because they connect with an important psychological question already active in the person's life. This distinction matters because the human mind is extremely good at recognizing patterns. We naturally notice information that confirms what we are already thinking about. If you are considering buying a particular car, you may suddenly notice that model everywhere. The number of cars probably did not change, your attention did. Psychological awareness therefore requires us to hold meaningful coincidences with curiosity without immediately turning them into supernatural certainty. In Jungian terms, synchronicity can be valuable because it draws attention to the relationship between our inner world and how we experience the outer world. The same event can be meaningless to one person and profoundly important to another. A song heard at a particular moment, an unexpected conversation, or a repeated image may resonate because it touches something emotionally alive within the psyche. The meaning comes partly from the psychological context in which the event occurs. The danger begins when every coincidence becomes a command. Someone sees the same number several times and concludes that a specific relationship is destined to return. Another person encounters an unexpected obstacle and assumes that God is forbidding an entire direction. These interpretations may feel comforting because they remove uncertainty, but they can also bypass evidence, practical judgment, and personal responsibility. A healthier question is not, "What does this coincidence force me to do?" but "Why does this event feel important to me right now?" That question brings the focus back to self-understanding. Perhaps the event represents a hope you have been afraid to acknowledge. Perhaps it reveals a decision you already know you need to consider. Perhaps it exposes how desperately you want reassurance. The coincidence becomes a doorway into reflection rather than a replacement for thinking. This approach also protects spiritual belief from becoming superstition. Faith can allow a person to experience life as meaningful without requiring them to decode every event as a secret message. You can believe that God is present in your life while also recognizing that not every delay, dream number, or unexpected encounter carries a precise divine instruction. Humility is important because certainty can easily become projection. There are moments, however, when a coincidence can genuinely interrupt our usual way of seeing things. A conversation may arrive at exactly the moment we are questioning ourselves. A book may introduce an idea that helps us understand a recurring conflict. An unexpected encounter may challenge a decision we were making automatically. The value of such moments does not depend on proving where they came from. Their psychological importance lies in what they awaken in us. This is why synchronicity fits so well with the larger theme of not forcing life. When we are obsessed with controlling one outcome, we tend to ignore information that does not support our preferred story. We notice only the signs that tell us to keep pushing, but when we loosen our grip, our attention becomes broader. We may begin to see alternatives, contradictions, and possibilities that were always present but psychologically invisible. Perhaps the healthiest way to approach synchronicity is to remain open without surrendering discernment. Before you go, if you're looking for a simple way to reduce stress and find more inner peace, I have something for you. Check out the ebook, The SIM Method, 5 minutes a day for inner peace and mental clarity. It only takes 5 minutes a day and can help you build a calmer, clearer mind. The link is in the first pinned comment, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to The Trauma of Being for more content like this. Notice what moves you. Ask why it matters. Compare the feeling with reality. Consider your values, responsibilities, and available evidence before making major decisions. A meaningful coincidence can invite reflection, but it should not imprison you inside certainty. Sometimes guidance is not a command telling you exactly where to go. Sometimes it is simply an interruption that helps you see your life from a different angle. 9. How to act without forcing the outcome. There is a practical question hidden underneath everything we have discussed so far. If we stop trying to control every outcome, how are we supposed to act? The answer is not to become passive. It is to shift our focus from controlling results to choosing our response. You may not be able to determine whether someone accepts you, whether an opportunity succeeds, or whether a plan unfolds exactly as expected. but you can still decide how honestly, carefully, and consistently you will participate in the process. The first step is to separate intention from attachment. Intention gives direction. Attachment demands a specific result. You can intend to build a healthy relationship without demanding that one particular person become your future. You can intend to grow professionally without believing that one job is the only path available. You can intend to heal without expecting the process to follow a perfect schedule. Intention creates movement. Attachment turns movement into pressure. The second step is to define what is actually under your control. Your preparation is under your control. Your effort is under your control. Your honesty, boundaries, habits, and decisions are largely under your control. Other people's reactions are not. Timing is not. Random events are not. The more clearly you separate these categories, the less energy you waste trying to manage what was never yours to command. This can radically change the way you approach relationships. Instead of asking, "How do I make this person choose me?" you ask, "Am I showing up with honesty, respect, and self-respect?" Instead of analyzing every delayed message, you observe the overall pattern of behavior. Instead of trying to influence someone through pressure, silence, jealousy, or constant reassurance seeking, you allow their choices to give you information. Their freedom becomes part of reality rather than an obstacle you must overcome. The same applies to work and ambition. You can prepare for an interview, improve your skills, seek feedback, and apply strategically. But after that, the decision belongs partly to other people and circumstances. If you tie your entire identity to the result, every rejection becomes a personal crisis. If you remain committed to growth rather than one outcome, rejection still hurts, but it also becomes information that can redirect your next action. Jungian psychology adds another layer to this practice. Observe what the outcome symbolizes to you. Sometimes we are not forcing the event itself, we are forcing what we believe it will prove. A promotion may symbolize worth. A relationship may symbolize being lovable. Recognition may symbolize finally being seen. When we identify the deeper meaning attached to the goal, we can begin working on that psychological need directly instead of demanding that one external event solve it for us. Acting without forcing also requires tolerance for incomplete information. Many people delay decisions because they want absolute certainty before moving, but certainty is rarely available. Mature action often means choosing based on the best information available, remaining attentive to consequences, and adjusting when reality provides new evidence. Flexibility is not indecision. It is the capacity to stay responsive rather than becoming trapped by pride. There is also value in setting a point of re-evaluation. Instead of pushing indefinitely, decide in advance when you will stop and reassess. You might say, "I will give this project 6 more months and then review what I have learned." Or, "I will communicate my needs clearly, but I will not continue chasing someone who repeatedly ignores them." These boundaries transform surrender from a vague idea into a concrete practice. For people of faith, this can be understood as cooperation rather than control. You make the best decision you can, pray if that is meaningful to you, and then allow reality to respond. You do not demand that faith guarantee success. You use faith to remain grounded when success is uncertain. In that sense, trusting God does not remove your responsibility to act. It removes the belief that your responsibility includes controlling the entire future. The paradox is that when you stop forcing the outcome, your actions often become clearer. You communicate because it is honest, not because you are trying to manipulate a response. You work because the effort matters, not because your worth depends on applause. You leave when remaining would betray your values, and you stay when commitment still has meaning. You continue moving, but you stop dragging the future toward you. And that may be one of the most important forms of psychological freedom, doing what is yours to do while allowing life to reveal what was never yours to control. Fechando o roteiro com 10 parágrafos, mantendo o tom psicológico, espiritual e educativo, e terminando com CTA natural para inscrição 10. Perhaps guidance begins when control ends. There comes a moment when control stops protecting us and starts exhausting us. We realize that no amount of planning can guarantee that people will stay, opportunities will arrive, or life will unfold according to our expectations. This realization can feel frightening at first because the ego prefers certainty. Yet it can also become the beginning of a different kind of strength, the ability to live without demanding guarantees from the future. Throughout this journey, we have seen that surrender is not the same as passivity. It does not mean refusing to make decisions, abandoning responsibility, or waiting for someone else to rescue us. It means recognizing the limits of our control while continuing to act according to our values. There is maturity in being able to say, I will do everything that is honestly mine to do, and I will stop trying to control what belongs to life, circumstance, or another person. From a Jungian perspective, this shift can also change our relationship with the ego. The ego no longer needs to behave as if it possesses the complete map. It can become a participant in a much larger psychological process. We can continue setting goals and making plans while remaining open to the possibility that our conscious desires do not contain the whole story of who we are or who we may become. This openness becomes especially important during periods of uncertainty. When the old path disappears and the new one has not yet become visible, our instinct may be to rush toward the first available answer. But sometimes psychological development requires us to remain inside uncertainty long enough to understand what is changing. Not every empty space must immediately be filled. Not every unanswered question needs to be forced into a conclusion. This is also where faith can become something deeper than a demand for reassurance. Trusting God does not necessarily mean believing that everything will happen exactly as we want. It can mean believing that our lives remain meaningful even when we cannot understand every event immediately. Faith can provide the courage to continue moving without pretending to possess complete certainty about the destination. There is a powerful difference between asking, "How can I make this happen?" and asking, "What is this situation asking me to become?" The first question focuses entirely on the external result. The second turns our attention toward character, awareness, and growth. Perhaps the relationship teaches us boundaries. Perhaps the rejection exposes how much we depended on external validation. Perhaps the failure forces us to develop abilities we had neglected. The event may not have been chosen, but our response remains deeply significant. Jung's idea of individuation reminds us that becoming whole does not mean creating a life without conflict. It means becoming increasingly conscious of the different parts of ourselves and developing a more honest relationship with them. Our strength and vulnerability, ambition and fear, faith and doubt can coexist. We do not need to eliminate every contradiction before moving forward. Sometimes integration begins simply by refusing to hide from what is already present. And perhaps this is why forcing life eventually becomes so painful. Every time we demand that reality confirm one specific version of ourselves, we reduce the possibilities available to us. We become attached not only to outcomes, but to identities. When we loosen that attachment, something changes. We may discover that a path we once considered failure was actually a transition, or that an ending we desperately resisted created room for a more authentic beginning. None of this requires us to romanticize suffering. Pain is still pain. Rejection still hurts. Grief deserves to be felt, rather than explained away with easy spiritual slogans. The goal is not to pretend that every difficult event was secretly wonderful. The goal is to recognize that even when we cannot choose what happens, we can still choose whether the experience makes us more unconscious or more aware. So perhaps the invitation is simple. Act with courage, reflect honestly, pray if prayer is part of your life, listen carefully to what your experiences reveal, and stop demanding that the future prove itself before you are willing to move. You do not need to control every door, every person, or every outcome. Sometimes the next stage of your life begins when you finally release what you were trying so desperately to force. If this reflection helped you see control, surrender, and your own inner life differently, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more explorations of Carl Jung, psychology, spirituality, and the hidden patterns that shape human behavior. And tell me in the comments, what is one thing in your life that you may need to stop forcing? Your answer may help someone else realize that letting go is not the end of the journey. It may be where a new one begins.